Hey everybody, this is going to be our video on parallel and perpendicular lines. This is a really great video if you're in algebra or geometry because they are used in both classes. Um, the parallel lines, I drew a little picture right here of two lines that are parallel. Now what it means to be parallel is that the two lines will never touch. These lines go on forever, as you can see with the arrows. They go on forever, but they will never touch because they have the same slope. And a real life example that can kind of explain what that means is, let's say two people are running on a track at school. If let's say one person gets let's say a 5-yard head start, starts running, and then the other person starts running afterwards, and if they're running at the same speed, they will never catch each other. Even though they're running around in a circle, the person that's behind, they will never catch the person in front of them, and the person in the front, they will never lap the person behind them because they're running at the same exact speed. They'll stay at the same distance away from each other because they have the same speed. Same idea here with the two parallel lines. They have the same slope, so they will never touch each other. Now, the exact opposite of that, the perpendicular lines, they always intersect, but it's not just that they intersect, they always intersect at this right angle, meaning a 90-degree angle. Now, the way that that shows when you're comparing the slopes is the slopes are reciprocals of each other, and we'll kind of go over that in the next page. They're reciprocals of each other, which means that if one slope is 1/2, a reciprocal means that the fraction flips. So if it's 1/2, the flipped fraction would be 2/1. Now the other thing that's different about a set of perpendicular lines is that not only is the fraction flipped, but the sign is flipped also. So let's say it was a positive 1/2. Well, the new slope is now going to be negative 1/2. So the fraction flips and the sign flips. Everything flips with perpendicular. Then with the slope, it's exactly the same. The sign is the same, the fraction is the same, everything is the same. Okay? One of the little ways that I try to help my students remember this also is that in the word parallel, there are two parallel lines right there, right? So if you look here, there are two parallel lines. And that's kind of how you can remember which one is which if you get confused about the terminology. All right, now my coworker made a really great table, and I'm going to share it with you guys because I think that it'll help you remember, like if you're going through a list. Let's say you're going through a list and you're trying to, that's sloppy. We're going through a list and you're trying to figure out, is it parallel, is it perpendicular? My coworker made a really great table that I'm going to show with you guys, or show to you guys. So we have sines, reciprocals, and then I'll even put a couple of examples in here. So you can compare if you're looking at two equations. If you're looking at two equations and you're trying to figure out, is it parallel, is it perpendicular, you can use this table. And if you want, you can pause this video to look at it. But this should be a really great help. Now, there are the two types of lines that we were talking about, parallel and perpendicular. Now, they have to be exactly the same for parallel, and they have to be reciprocals and opposites for it to be perpendicular. Everything else falls into this intersecting, because if it's not parallel, it's gonna hit another line at some point. And then perpendicular is it intersects that line at a 90-degree angle. So for a parallel line, the signs are the same. So if you have two slopes, the signs are going to be the same for parallel. And then we talked about with perpendicular, the signs are going to be opposite. Okay, so parallel lines have the same sign, right? Positive, positive, or negative, negative. And then perpendicular will be opposite. So one will be positive, one will be negative. The reciprocals. In parallel, they are not reciprocals. They are not reciprocals because they stay exactly the same. So if the slope is 2, the parallel line is going to have a slope of 2. If the slope is 1 over 3, the slope is going to be 1 over 3. It's going to be the same exact thing. So then with the perpendicular lines, it is going to be a reciprocal. Okay? There is a reciprocal, which means that that fraction does flip. Okay? Some examples of this are, let me change the color so it stands out a little bit. So over here we'll say slope 1 we'll say is 2. So if parallel lines are exactly the same, that means slope 2 is also going to be 2. Perpendicular. Remember, with perpendicular, everything is flipped. So the fraction is going to be flipped. So let's say m1 is going to be, we'll say negative 1 over 3. Well, that means that m2 would have to be a positive, I'll even write the little positive, 3 over 1. Okay, so notice how the fraction flips and the sign flips. Now, intersecting has two different kinds. Because remember, intersecting is everything else. If it doesn't fall into these two categories, it's going to be intersecting. So intersecting, okay, let's say we have the same slope. The same sign. Well, that means that it's going to have to be a reciprocal. So if it's the same sign and it reciprocals, notice it's not parallel because it has a reciprocal, right? So it can't be parallel. And it's not perpendicular because it has the same sign. So an example of something like this would be, come on, there we go. An example of something like this would be if M1 is, let's say M1 is negative 1 over 2, and then we'll say M2 is, let's say negative 2 over 1, right? So we have both of them are negative, but there's a reciprocal. In order for it to be parallel, the signs have to be the same, just like it is, and also it would have to stay the same. So it would have to be 1/2, 1/2. Okay, so that's why that's not parallel. It's not perpendicular because yes, it flipped. It has the reciprocal, right? But the signs are the same. So then the other kind of intersecting would be where the signs are opposites. But the reciprocal doesn't have it. So notice, okay, well the sign is the same or is opposite, but no reciprocal. So it can't be perpendicular, it can't be parallel because the signs are opposite. They're not the same. So an example of this would be if we have like M1 is 2 over 1, and then M2 is negative 2 over 1. So you see the fraction stayed the same, right? It didn't flip, but the sign flips. So that's why it's not parallel or perpendicular. Hopefully this video helps you understand the difference between parallel and perpendicular. I just hope that you have a better understanding of those two lines. Thank you.